Hey everybody, it's your host, Diana Chen, and you're listening to an episode of Minihash, a condensed episode of Rehash where we do a deep dive into one focused topic with a past guest. Hope you enjoy. I am so excited to have you back on Rehash. I've podcasted with you several times, but I think only once before on Rehash, and that was back in season 5, episode 5, which was back in July of 2023, so a little over a year ago. And in that episode, we talked mostly about on-chain world building, and we definitely talked about autonomous worlds. I actually just went back and listened to the bit about autonomous worlds just because I wanted to see how your thinking has evolved over the last a little over a year. And I don't know if you remember what you said on that episode, but the things that you said are actually pretty aligned with what you recently wrote in that Mirror article and that you had that tweet thread on. So I applaud you for having had a clear start to your train of thought over a year ago and then having developed that thesis out over the last year or so. Where to start? I guess give us like the high level of how you've been thinking around like what is an autonomous world at a very high level.
I still have no clue, to be frank. I think I like to even pretend the whole idea of autonomous world. It's a concept, it's a vision, it's a scene of builders. We're trying to figure out what they are even. But I think we're inspired by this idea of world as a new content medium that you can build and bring into the world and what that brings and what that means. And we've seen worlds in different forms to this date, from games to Ethereum as an example. And I think it's going to be a design space that will continue on, and there's going to be a lot of experimentations at hand. But at least for me, back off a lot of experimentations happened over the last year with on-chain games and autonomous world experiments, right? I think, yeah, there's been some learnings, there's been some conclusions, there's some new ideas or consolidation of ideas around what could be one version or one form factor of an autonomous world, right? And I think people have like maybe taken a few steps too far into the future a little without properly looking backwards and assessing when was the last successful great world that emerged, that's been created. And I would actually probably point towards Ethereum. Ethereum was great, not because of the technology. It was net new, it was, smart contracts were a big deal. But where Ethereum really shined was not as just a piece of technology, but as a culture, as a society, as a blank canvas that everyone created on, released toys on, that everyone clung onto, and found, I would say, an endless depth of entertainment and fun and play with, right? A great example, right? They're just a bunch of objects on this blank canvas, but we've somehow found such fun building tribes over them, around the ownership of them, right? It's like we've played house in a way, right? And I think that when you sort of zoom out, you look at the activity, the experience of Ethereum, the chaos that it is, the intersection of, being a bit of a sandbox, a financial system, and really entertainment in itself. It really feels, blockchains really themselves a medium for this sort of entertainment, this sort of fun, right? And I feel like we just really haven't had the right word to describe these net new experiences that wouldn't otherwise exist on a blockchain. Meme coins are a great example. It's in between finance and, entertainment. It's a bit of both, right? And maybe not so much of it as a computer, maybe in the sense that you can deploy them easily and you can write to a shared world, right? You can deploy them to a shared context, right? That is a blockchain. But I think that the blockchain enables like a new surface area in which you can play different ways, right? And if you look at sort of the success of Ethereum, it was not really preconceived. No one really preconceived it as a game, as an experience, but we've naturally found Ethereum, and picked it up and played with it and found our own games with it. And I sort of wonder, what could we do if we actually take blockchains seriously as a medium for fun and lean into that, as opposed to sort of, tout the classic narratives around how blockchains are going to solve all our problems. They're going to, bring mass adoption and everything will be okay. And how, blockchains will solve world hunger and all these other big problems. I feel like blockchains got boring and dull when people took them too seriously. And what if the whole point of blockchain was to mess about and muck about online? In this new intersection between finance, entertainment, and being a bit of a shared sandbox that you can do anything on permissionlessly. And, I wrote the thesis with the goal of not mentioning autonomous worlds at all, I felt like people don't need to know about the term to think about it, to even build them, right? Like, it's a nerdy design space. You could replace the Thomas worlds with a term metaverse and you get 80%, 90% of that, right? So I really wanted to talk about, the opportunity, what the last great world looked like, and, in a relatable fashion, and work backwards a little from that, right? And I think, we can definitely get into the how you can maybe go about building the next great fun worlds. But I think this, in short, this is kind of the thesis at hand.
Yeah, I really like the overall vibe from the thesis. There's a heavy emphasis on just having fun and enjoying ourselves. And I do think that's something that gets missed a lot in blockchain and crypto, and people want to take it really seriously. And it's, yes, great. If we can solve world hunger and bring world peace with this technology, great. But even if we can't, it doesn't mean that it's a failed technology or that it's useless or that we can't still have fun with it. We don't have to take everything to such an extreme, and we can just live in the moment, have a good time with our friends, and make the most of what we have. So I definitely like that overall kind of just like optimistic and lighthearted and fun energy that your thesis brings. What do you think are the elements of blockchain that you think uniquely enables this world to exist? And on the flip side, could you imagine a world similar to the world that we built in Ethereum existing outside of Ethereum or outside of blockchain completely?
Great question. I would say, totally. These worlds can be totally built outside of Ethereum and without Ethereum. And I would even say that, I can definitely see these worlds being built without blockchains as well. We've had permissionless, self-propagating worlds that are rich, fun, but we've never had worlds that are both fun, immersive, but with the level of significance and realism and level of consequence we have with real value, which is what blockchains provide, right? So I think this sort of like ties back to the idea that worlds as a content medium, it's not a new one. We've had them. We've had permissioned worlds. I think J.K. Rowling with, Harry Potter, it's a permissioned one. And, she actively has been notorious for stumping on the diegetic or the content boundaries of the world, right? She's infamous for stumping and sort of hindering fan fiction, for example. Right. And then we've had, ones that are far more open. Think D&D, Dungeons and Dragons Online. There's like a general preconceived set of lore, but then you really build and expand on it with every play session, right? And I think that blockchains, when you zoom out, they're inherently a new canvas for creating new things with immense significance and immense realism. And I think that may be the whole point. This wasn't in the Twitter post, but in the actual full-length blog post, I start off with, nothing real has ever come out of the blockchain to date. And what if that's actually the whole point? Even when researchers release sort of a white paper describing a new technical solution, a new blockchain, they're sort of world building. They're like promising that, something. Some are promising returns, some are promising this is performant. And even from that perspective, you can sort of think of that as a playground for nerds to understand the technology. And in many ways, meme coins have been a world in which those are fascinated and interested in memes and the social element itself drawn to it. And, blockchains allow this significance to emerge through programmable value, right? And I think unlike other posts about autonomous worlds, I think that I'm actually being far more opinionated here by saying that the last great world was Ethereum. If you think of that as a piece of content, a world in itself, people have been searching for the next great world, and people probably recognize the next ones in the form of a blockchain. I take sort of inspiration for how Sid Meier designs the Civilization series. For him, every Civilization game release, the design principles that you always want to design the game with that's 50% old and familiar and 50% new. You never want to do something too new. People won't recognize it. You don't want to do something too old, too incremental. And I think the idea of blockchains being the delivery mechanism is sort of the meme I'm trying to propagate, and to take this, medium seriously. And how do you do so? I think that you can do so both on the contract layer by designing new physics that the entire blockchain revolves around. A great example is, let's say a game with Citadel. They're trying to build an EVE online-like game on the blockchain. It's an on-chain game, right? And how it would exist as a cohesive world would, they might have smart contracts that define location, X, Y, Z, right? And they might define, asteroids right, that have resources that you can go mine. And rather than the whole economic model or the token model of the chain revolving around security, it might revolve around player participation in mining the asteroids that naturally emerge programmatically, right? And you can sort of think of players and participants participating in that as social validation instead. So I think the thesis is very much about defining, hey, this is one form factor that has worked. We should probably build on this and see how it can evolve. Rather than, I think, a lot of the on-chain game space, at least what we've learned so far, is that, we build games on-chain, they don't feel worldly. People don't recognize them as such. We've also recognized that, composability is a meme. Composability is like the third or fourth order effect of having a blockchain with a lot of activity and content on it, right? Like you have a blockchain like blank canvas and a lot of people create on top of it. And then 1 out of 1,000 creations matter. And then you build around that, right? Versus I think what we've learned is, the original thinking maybe a year ago is that you build an on-chain game or you build these worlds and then people can build permissionlessly on top of them. It's incredibly hard for you to sort of force this composable creation on top of your game as opposed to a blockchain itself. Like where has there been the most success UGC-wise with crypto, or arguably in the history of technology? It's worth a blockchain. We've had the most meaningful economic user-generated content emerge on a blockchain, nowhere else. So I think we've sort of misunderstood a couple concepts around blockchains, composability, the games themselves. And we've circulated around the right ideas, but we've misconfigured them, we've miscomposed them. And I think the whole idea I'm sort of proposing is that you build an on-chain game, a new world, that ideally one that acts like a bit of a computer, a game that allows for people to fill and interact with more protocol-like rather than a closed loop game, right? And you alter not only the chain, but perhaps you build the entire economic model of the chain around the game itself. And you're not releasing a game, you're not releasing a chain, you're releasing sort of the totality of that into the world. And you're not selling a technical solution, you're not selling anything, you're selling a fantasy on the internet. And you're giving people a role to play, you're giving people a purpose that's completely imaginary. I think that might be a far more promising working model for worlds. And it's sort of very much inspired by Ethereum as a success case point, right? And it takes half a step rather than 10 steps in the future.
And when you use the word games, because I think this is where a lot of people get confused about autonomous worlds, is that they immediately associate it with games in the very narrow sense of a very literal sense of a game. And a lot of people are like, well, I'm not a gamer. I don't play games in the traditional sense. I don't play video games. I don't play D&D. So, this is just not applicable to me. But you're really using the word game as a set of rules that govern a community of people, essentially, in short. And so that can be, for example, when we chatted last summer, you said you can think of a country with a government as a game. That's a game. You have rules. These are the laws of the country. There's people governing that. And then if you want to be part of this country, you have to follow those rules. Or like right now, I'm at my parents' house and they have a set of rules that they use in their house that maybe are different from the rules that I use in my house or that you use in your house. And so in that sense, it's almost like I'm playing their game, like I'm playing my parents' game right now by living in their house. And that's all we're talking about here with Ethereum, is that with Ethereum, there's just a set of rules that we're playing by. And Ethereum is different from maybe even the real world in the sense that it is fully decentralized. And so, as opposed to, for example, the US government, there are these group of old white men with some sort of power for whatever reason who come up with all of these rules, and no one else has any say in it, right? Like we're taught to believe that we have some sort of say in it, and in truth, that's really limited. But I think with Ethereum, with blockchain, that authority is much more decentralized. And to me, that is sort of like the biggest differentiator I think of when I think of autonomous worlds versus like a real life game, like a country or house rules or something like that.
Yeah, well put. Yeah. And most games have some sort of like objective, and then you're subject under a set of constraints. In our case, Ethereum. And yeah, I think if this was so fun when it was never designed to be so, how do we create the next fun ones? So I've sort of talk about a couple ideas, such as why not have a chain that only produces blocks on the weekend? What if you alter, absolute ownership rather than owning something forever? Others can steal from you, from your wallet, based on a set of rules. Or maybe you can only hold 10 tokens or 20 NFTs per address, and maybe you're subject to now XY coordinates. And and there's a bit more to it. I think games are inherently, from a physics level, pretty straightforward. And then, I think it's the last 10% that really defines and opinionates what type of game it feels like, along the story that goes along with it. And yeah, it's sort of like the saying that, we're too late to explore the Earth, too early to explore the stars, right? But like maybe we're just at the right time to, explore completely fake but incredibly meaningful, hyper real, hyper consequential world on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your thesis, in your Mirror article that you wrote, when you start talking about what could be the next great worlds to emerge from all of this, there are two things that you highlight as these two areas of white space are ripe for innovation. And those are, one, democratizing participation, and two, generating immersion. Can you explain for us a little bit more what you mean by these two things?
Totally. On the first aspect, in terms of democratizing participation, if you look at Ethereum, very few people can actually directly read and write to the blockchain. In the cases in which which are devs, right? But in the cases in which, people have been, able to directly write to the blockchain, right? They're interacting through contract factories or applications that are specifically designed for the average idiot like me to input a bunch of parameters, type a bunch of text, and, deploy something that's permanent and lasting there, right? And the idea is that you can sort of think about the Uniswap contract factory, or even like a meme coin launcher like Pump, as a bit of a computer or a game in itself that you can build as an interface to the rest of the blockchain, right? And I think, let's say, there's a project called Biomes, on-chain Minecraft. It's a great example because everyone's seen Minecraft, right? Rather than needing to write a bunch of Solidity code and interact directly with the blockchain, it's a world in which you just click and place down a block and you directly make a mark in the world, just like how you deploy a Uniswap pool or launch a meme coin. The physics and the game or the game mechanics itself provide a new window that allows, for people to interact with the blockchain far more closely, far more natively, right? And ideally introducing elements in different compositions of skill and luck that, like skill usually, levels the playing ground with bots and with defines the experience in itself. Luck, flattens the playing ground against bots in general. It's not that, you're trying to dissuade bots. It's more about leveling the playing ground for anyone to have a chance. And there's different ways to implement, I would say physics that, differentiated in skill and luck that level the playing ground and allows for greater participation on the chain itself, right? Yeah, I would say that's the first thing.
Yeah, I really like that aspect of it a lot. The fact that you don't have to be a dev or a builder in the traditional sense in order to build these worlds, that anyone can come in and participate, build new worlds or sub worlds within these worlds. I think that's something that's super exciting to me. And we're not quite there yet. I think we still have a little ways to go. But even in the last few years, I've seen us make so much progress in terms of creating these, I don't know if we'd call it like no code solutions, but at least more accessible tools for non-technical people.
Totally. You can think about games as no code solutions that writes data to the computer. Yeah, it's true. Like it's kind of what you can think about. And I think, grade physics that are a good fit with the chain probably look like state machine extensions to the EVM, right? I think like you don't want to throw away the EVM. It's been responsible for massive interoperability and massive levels of innovation, and everyone knows Solidity, etc. And I think, sure, you can pick different virtual machines of different levels of adoption, but the idea is like you want to probably build, the 50-50 rule, build with something known, and then construct something on top that is the focus, or then maybe augment underlying rules bit by bit. Right? And maybe you end up with something differentiated. The second aspect is really the story you tell. Don't tell people a story about a blockchain or a game. That's too boring. Go market a different universe and really, create mystique and bring people in. We can reskin everything from the block explorer to the bridge experience, make it part of the story. And yeah, I actually think this is probably, going to be a key part of what people want, which is like mass adoption. It's not when you just abstract out the experience and people don't have to worry about seed phrases. It's when you're not telling people about the tech and telling people, hey, come over here. There's like this entire new world to be discovered. And using that as the pull. I also talk about the importance of role play. People really, at their best when they play a role that they're given. It's sort of that analogy of, you hear these stories about like someone struggles to open a jar, like you perform a feat of strength, but then they're told to pretend that they're like the world's strongest person and they're able to do it with far more efficiency. And I think it's a similar thing. DeFi was fun when people treated it as a meme and seen it as a lighthearted thing that people just played with. It was just like pure play. I think this idea that this is serious tech and we should really hold on to logic, reason, and reality. And I think the whole point is to throw that away and sell people this thing that is lighthearted, fantastical, positive. And I think by doing so, you can be unapologetic about it. You're not selling people like a scam of getting to world peace or solving the world's problems. You're just promising a bit of fun. And, I think that's important, actually.
I absolutely agree with that. I think fun is such a big part of all of this. And I think, too, that there are potentially more serious implications to this as well. I know we've mostly just been talking about having fun and being lighthearted and things like that. But I do think that I could at least see some implication where this autonomous world concept that we're talking about eventually creates a way for people to find their tribe, to find other people that they want to be friends with online. I think, in the past we would say, oh, let's get a group of friends together and create a multi-sig and buy up these NFTs or do things on chain. It was all pretty DeFi oriented still. But if we expand past that, if we have a group of friends, these are the people I vibe with the most. Is there some way that we could create an autonomous world where we set these are the rules, these are our house rules, this is how we play the game, and other people who are out there who we haven't come across, if they like these house rules and they're like, wow, I super vibe with that, this would be exactly my house rules if I came up with it, so I'm gonna go and see what these people are about. And that could be a great way for people to meet people online, find friends online, find
precisely.
Yeah,
that is the whole point. Yeah, it's purpose. Like, that's what games have given people. It's a escape, it's a purpose, and arguably what was so great about Ethereum was that there was a culture and a belief system instilled and gave people a purpose. Even if in the process we were just mucked about on the internet, I think that's important. It's like purpose is so powerful, right? And so many people are missing it. And I think it's purpose that draws people in. And it's not purpose in the sense of we're going to solve serious problems, but an invitation to be someone else or to be part of a group that's trying to achieve something weird, strange, interesting, fun, right? Yeah,
that's a huge problem if we can solve it, is people are growing increasingly more and more lonely online, even as we become more connected. So I think if we can be more strategic about helping people actually find the people that they connect with the most, we could turn the narrative there and make it that the more time we spend online, the more actually fulfilled and the more we get the sense of belonging and the less lonely we feel versus what, our current state of the internet is. So I do want to, we just had a question in the chat. Let me read this real quick. Have you seen any meta RPGs try to be this interface to on-chain worlds, apart from, say, Other Side, which is attempting this, but will likely have high barrier to entry? Yeah, best of luck on the Other Side with the Bored Apes. Let's see how that goes. But I would check out, so this is no longer live because there's a bit of a seasonal experience, but I would check out the Curse Machine. They still have a demo up, but after playing the demo, go and check out the community and scroll all the way back. This sort of goes back to what we're talking about. These games, these systems, these rules are all meant to invite us to roleplay and to participate in a different place, in a different world. They're all instruments and devices for us to build and construct these worlds. And money is a proof. TVL is proof of its significance, right? And it creates more global buy-in of this fake reality or this imaginary one, right? So I would check them out. This Curse Machine was created by Moving Castles team, and they really understand what it means to build on-chain systems, on-chain worlds, but with the end goal being the sense of play involved. That is the end goal. The friendships is the point. Games of friendship machines, relationship machines. That's why people stay. And these are just devices that craft a world in which people feel, the sort of, I would say, give people a role to play, but also breaks down that social barrier into connecting with each other, right? Yeah, absolutely. The last question I had for you, and not to sort of bring down the mood, because I feel like this is overall a very uplifting episode, but I do like to always consider all sides of any kind of new technology or new implementation of a technology. And the thing that comes to mind is what happens when people don't want to follow the rules, right? So if you think about in the traditional world, if you break the laws of the country that you live in, you could go to jail. If you break your house rules of your parents' house that you're living in, you'll probably get yelled at by your parents. There are, penalties for not following the house rules. And so if you created an autonomous world, a bad actor comes into your autonomous world, doesn't want to follow the rules of your game, and just wants to maybe steal other people's stuff in your wallet when that is not part of the game, or just cause trouble. Are there ways that we can address this and make sure it doesn't happen so that we can continue to have positive experiences?
So like, bully comes along and stomps in everyone's, sandcastles that everyone's been building up. I mean, this goes back to, I think, the importance of framing it as a non-serious world, like how the framing of it and the narrative you build around it is so important, and it acts as an immune system to unforeseen events, to issues that come along, to the difference between someone feeling rugged and feeling excited because they got wrecked in a game is the framing and the relationship you begin, and you sort of start with a player at the very beginning, right? I think that's importance of promising basically nothing.
Right.
It's important to promise nothing but a bunch of chaos and fun. It's part of the narrative engineering to frame what people should feel and respond to when certain things happen in the game. And in fact, the Moving Castles team are amazing at this. So what happened at some point is that bots hit the game. So guess what? They created a department of stump registration. It's like the DMV to like almost rubber stamp new players that are real coming in. So for them, the whole game of the seasonal release was just meant to validate the world building side a little, not a coherent fully fledged economy that's bulletproof. And when that happened, because they built a fun, playful world that could adapt at any moment, that was not so serious, they were able to immediately turn that bug into a feature and design a law around it, design to explain and storytell that like a system malfunction has happened. We've installed a new government that's going to approve new players from now on. And it's a chat that you enter into and beg that to be given the initial starting bug tokens to play the game. And it only increased the immersion and I think the sense of play and the reality of the situation. So I think it's entirely up to what you promise. You promise people a financial system and people get wrecked, yeah, they're gonna be pissed. You promise a game in which you're gonna get wrecked and it's like a dark, grimy place in which you have to cower for shelter with others and it's a dangerous world. I think people may know what they're getting into. So I don't talk about these worlds in always in a fully positive light. We could have chains that are designed to be entire horror shows. Maybe you just randomly lose funds based on the weather of the game and it affects everyone globally, right? There could be systems like that and you role play into that. It could be an incredibly harsh environment in which you're forced to collaborate with others for it, right? So, and maybe the end goal is like there may be even a chain in which it was designed to bring an apocalypse in which everyone is wiped out and the whole point is to watch the lost group survive. So I think this is the importance of the lore and story and narrative that you construct around it. And first, so important that these things aren't like serious. They're meant to be ideally completely crazy, nuts, and everything in between.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like you could have a group of people who are really into horror movies that come together and build out a series of haunted houses that they have to make their way through and not get eaten by zombies in the process. And that's how they have fun. Or it's just like an April Fool's world where the point is to play pranks on each other. And it's like if your friend plays an April Fool's joke on you, you're not going to be like, oh man, I got rugged. Never talking to that guy again. You're going to laugh about it and be like, oh, you got me good. Good job. So yeah.
Great example. It's like you do that without like any context. You're gonna be pissed. You're gonna be like, it's gonna almost feel like a declaration of war, and you feel incredibly. But yeah, hey, it reminds you when like people like the pranksters on YouTube are like they do something atrocious, and then suddenly like, chill, bro, it's a prank, and then suddenly everyone relaxes a little, at least.
I think this could be good for the overall vibe of the internet, honestly, because I think like the problem with the internet is that everyone is taking everything so seriously. You post something slightly controversial on Twitter and all of a sudden everyone comes for you. No one can understand any context or nuance or humor or sarcasm behind any of that. And so it just becomes like this full on bloody war all the time. And if autonomous worlds, this concept that you're proposing becomes the norm one day, and maybe the next generation, like Gen Alpha, adopts this autonomous world thing. Everybody's building an autonomous world for their group of friends, maybe multiple groups of friends, because maybe one group of my friends has this interest and I want to build this world and another has another interest, so I'm part of 5 different worlds. Then maybe that could also cure this problem of the internet just being people fighting all the time. And who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you got to treat it like, reality TV is a great medium and genre to learn from. I've watching a lot of it. And,
I'm very well versed in that.
It's awesome, and it's just take a leaf out of that. When something goes wrong, make content of it. That is the point. It is like drama. And that's sort of the thing. It's realizing that whenever there's been a group of people that have had governance over something important, it's always ended up as a shit show. You have, governments that are entire shit shows, right? To date, highly dysfunctional, malfunctioned, except it's actually like not the funnest thing ever because it's like, it's important that they're, functional, etc. But we've effectively replicated similar systems on chain, like governance tokens and DAOs. And I think it's like, if the default is drama, chaos, and malfunction, why not make that content?
Exactly. Yeah. Why not make that content? Peter, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
I would say this. If anyone's building products in the space, especially in entertainment, don't just try to build a product. Try to think about how would your product incite drama, chaos, and fun in between. That is good TV, if you want to call it that.
Totally.
But try to focus on that rather than trying to build something skeuomorphic that looks like an app. The best applications built on a blockchain that we've seen so far are incredibly simple, that they look more like a toy that people pick up and fidget with and then figure out how to have fun with. So I think that's something I would generally call to the space to do and focus on and think more about.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come back on Rehash. Remind people where they can find you if they want to follow you online or on chain or wherever you live.
Twitter would be the place. I'm the squiggle as usual.
Peter Pan with a 3. We'll include it in the show notes to make it easy for people to click through. Thanks so much, Peter. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.